In every single courtroom, every powerful meeting, and on every battlefield where influence is fought for, men tend to talk way too fast. They talk way too much and far too openly. They often confuse just making noise with actually having sway. But the ones who truly win, the ones who end up ruling, do it with this incredibly powerful silent weapon. It's the superior tool in all matters involving people, and in the complex, sometimes harsh world of politics. Real power doesn't always come from a sword, or a crown, or even from being adored by the crowd. More often than not, it's hidden in plain sight, in the subtle, the restrained, and most cleverly of all, in silence that leaves others feeling unnerved. The person who figures out how to use silence like a sharp blade quickly understands they've got something much more cutting than words and much stronger than sheer force. Staying quiet in a world buzzing with constant noise isn't a sign of weakness. It's actually a smart strategy, something an ambitious person understands when they choose to speak. You have to realize that every single word you say is like opening yourself up. Speaking is essentially revealing your intentions, your beliefs, your deepest fears. It's like creating a map of your inner self, and maps, when they fall into the wrong hands, become tools for destruction. When you speak your mind freely, you're giving others the very things they can use to take you down. Silence prevents this. When you're silent, you give your opponents no real advantage. You don't invite an attack because you haven't really given them a specific target to aim at. Your rivals are forced to guess, and in their guessing, they inevitably make mistakes. They start projecting their own insecurities, their own hopes, and their own plans onto the silent person. And in these projections, they actually reveal themselves. They become unnerved by the silent individual because they can't read them. In royal courts, a prince who speaks little is far more intimidating than one who loudly dictates orders. In government meetings, the advisor who listens more than they talk is assumed to be much smarter than they might actually be. People naturally associate wisdom with quietness. They feel unease and a sense of danger towards what they can't easily predict. They might call it being careful, mysterious, or in control. But fundamentally, it's an illusion of dominance created by refusing to share your thoughts. By staying silent, you control the pace of any confrontation. When you don't react to provocations, you force your opponent to make another move, and then perhaps another, until they wear themselves out or give away their true goal. Every extra step they take increases the likelihood of them making a mistake. Meanwhile, the silent player observes, gathers intel, and adapts with every passing moment, always staying flexible and never exposing themselves. They lose nothing by waiting, but they risk everything by revealing too much too soon. The person who speaks first has already given up their advantage. They've essentially defined the playing field before even understanding its layout. They might commit to a stance, declare a loyalty, or hint at a desire. Any of these actions can be used against them. The silent person, on the other hand, commits to nothing. They can easily change direction without seeming inconsistent. Their silence protects them from being contradicted, from being trapped, and from making premature commitments. While others get tangled up in their own statements and promises, they remain unburdened. Being silent also means listening with a clear purpose, not just passively, but being completely aware. The words spoken by others are like weapons left lying around. During conversations, secrets tend to spill out carelessly. The person who loves to talk, caught up in their own voice, doesn't even realize what they're revealing or what others are letting slip. The silent individual, however, collects these small pieces of information. They observe facial expressions, note any inconsistencies, and listen to hesitations. They build a collection of valuable intelligence without ever offering any of their own. This isn't being mute. It's like being a spy. Silence also has a way of drawing attention. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, to make their point, and to convince others, the person who speaks infrequently creates a void. And into that void, others lean in, curious about what's going on in their head, what they know, what their plans might be. Their infrequent words are heard with much greater focus because they are rare. This restraint gives their speech significant weight. They don't compete by being the loudest. They command attention through scarcity. What isn't said often becomes more impactful than any speech could ever be. Of course, there's a risk in always being silent. You can't let your silence be mistaken for being absent or weak. You do need to speak sometimes, but only when the moment is right for you, only when your words are precisely honed weapons. Your silence is the protective sheath, and your speech is the blade you draw only when you know the strike is guaranteed to hit. So, silence is never just a passive state. It's not about being a coward or being undecided. It's a deliberate choice. It's deciding not to get drawn into a situation on someone else's terms. It's about creating your own space and refusing to play by everyone else's rules. In political maneuvering, in wartime, in negotiations, and even in personal disputes, the person who speaks the least reveals the least, and therefore stands to lose the least. The one who talks a lot is already starting from a position of weakness. Every leader, every commander, every strategist who has managed to last longer than a brief period of success has understood the value of silence. This isn't the silence of giving up, but the silence of an ambush, the quiet before a storm, the silence of someone who has already made up their mind but sees no reason to announce it yet. Let others brag, boast, and reveal their schemes out loud. Let them voice their plans and give away their strategies. The person who controls themselves is the one who can control others, and nothing signals self-control more clearly than silence. It's discipline embodied. A man who can hold back his urge to speak also shows he can hold back his sword, his anger, and his pride. And such a person is feared not because they're loud, but because they simply don't need to be. People believe their words make them superior. They think speaking is how you assert power, influence people's thoughts, and shape what happens. But those who truly grasp how power works know that speaking, far more often, is actually the weak spot in your defenses. Every word spoken is a disclosure, and every disclosure is a potential vulnerability. The enemy doesn't need to interrogate someone who's already eager to explain themselves. They just need to listen, and the speaker will willingly share their ambitions, their doubts, and their fears, all presented as strong convictions. Speaking is often a compulsion for those who feel insecure. The person who feels the need to explain themselves is seeking approval, agreement, and confirmation that their viewpoint is valid. But in the realm of power, seeking validation is already a concession. The person who needs applause to act or reassurance to make a decision is actually being controlled by others, even when they think they're in charge. Their tongue betrays them long before any weapon could. To speak is to make claims, and claims can be challenged. To speak is to take a stand, and stands can be attacked. The louder someone proclaims their stance, the easier it becomes to pinpoint their mistakes. A small contradiction here, a misstep there, and suddenly the entire foundation of their image starts to crumble. The crowd that was once cheering now watches with doubt. Their enemies just need to repeat their own words back to them, slightly twisted, to cause irreparable damage. And so, the very weapon they thought they were using becomes the rope that hangs them. It's a mistake to believe that strength comes from eloquent speech. Charisma in speaking isn't true power. It's a convincing imitation. Words can dazzle the easily swayed and entertain the masses, but they don't lead to genuine victory. A ruler who governs solely through speech must constantly change their act, because the crowd is unpredictable and always wants something new. The moment they repeat themselves or fail to impress, the crowd will turn against them. The tyrant who talked too much becomes the comedian whose jokes are no longer funny. They shared their thoughts freely, and now the public feels entitled to them. Even in discussions, speaking involves risk. Someone who argues too passionately reveals what is most important to them. They expose the ground they are absolutely unwilling to give up. A shrewd opponent takes note of this, stores it away, and later uses that very passion against them. The more intensely someone speaks, the more predictable they become. What starts as a strong declaration quickly devolves into a confession of desire. And nothing is more dangerous in politics than a clearly visible desire, because it allows words can impress the impressionable and amuse the public, but they can't truly win. A leader who rules only with words must always change up his act because people are easily bored and always want something fresh. The second he repeats himself or can't excite them, they'll abandon him. The dictator who talked too much ends up as the clown whose jokes aren't funny anymore. He shared his thoughts, and now they feel entitled to them. They're scared. Even in private talks, speaking is risky. Someone who argues too intensely shows everyone what's most important to them. They reveal the ground they absolutely won't give up. A clever opponent notices this, remembers it, and later uses that exact strong feeling against them. The more strongly someone expresses themselves, the easier they are to figure out. They're scared. What starts as showing power quickly turns into revealing what they really want. And in the political arena, showing what you want is incredibly risky because it makes you. Others try to provoke or trap you. Think about how interrogations work. A torturer never got the truth just by staying quiet. They talked, asked questions, and pushed. Eventually, the person would break. But someone who stays silent can't be broken in the same way. They deny the torturer what they want most: information. Here, silence isn't just a defense. It's a weapon against those who want to control you. Speaking also reveals feelings, even if you don't mean to. A slight pause, a change in tone, a casual remark. These are all clues. You might carefully choose your words, but your voice will give away what you're really thinking. They're absolutely terrified. Someone listening closely hears not just the words, but the person behind them. They hear the doubt in a pause, the frustration in a strained voice, the fear in quick breaths. In this way, speaking exposes your inner self, and once your inner self is visible, it can be hurt. There's also a risk in being heard too much. When people know you too well, they start to take you for granted. Someone who talks all the time becomes predictable. Their ideas get old, and you know what they'll say before they even speak. They practically invite interruptions, disagreements, and even ridicule. Over time, their words lose their impact. They just become background noise. On the other hand, someone who speaks infrequently builds anticipation. They're absolutely terrified. When they do speak, their words carry real weight because they're rare. People pay attention because they aren't just talking for the sake of it. Even friendships can be strained by too much talking. Someone who can't keep a secret, who shares plans too easily, creates mistrust. If they'll tell one person easily, they'll tell another just as easily. When he chooses to speak, his words have impact because they're not used often. They grab attention because they aren't just tossed out randomly. Even friendships can be strained by talking too much. Someone who can't keep a secret, who shares their strategies openly, causes suspicion. If they talk so casually to one person, they'll do the same to another. Private matters become public knowledge, and allies start to distance themselves, worried about exposure. It's better to seem distant than to be a problem. They're not concerned. It's better to say nothing than to say too much and endanger everyone. In war, strategy relies on deception, and deception needs silence. A general who openly discusses their plans gives the enemy time to prepare. The opponent adapts and the advantage is lost. But if the general says nothing, if the troops move quietly, if their intentions are hidden, then the enemy walks into ambushes, traps, and destruction. Words steal surprise and weaken your position. A silent move surprises, but a spoken move is already expected. Even in moments of victory, speaking can be dangerous. To brag is to invite jealousy. To mock is to create resentment. Victory doesn't need to be announced. It shows itself in the outcome. A person who can't win quietly ensures their victories won't last. Their enemies will only increase. They are terrified not because of what the person did, but because of what they said about it. A leader might be feared for their power, but they are hated for their arrogance. And arrogance always speaks loudly. In the game of power, being noticeable is often mistaken for having influence. People rush to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. They believe being visible gives them control. They stand out in every conversation. They're terrified, desperate to be noticed, convinced that their involvement proves they matter. They're terrified, but they miss that the person with real power isn't always the one in the spotlight. They're noticed, confident that their involvement proves they matter. They're scared, but what they terrified is the one whose absence is more impactful than their presence. Mastering how others perceive you means understanding what the crowd believes. People aren't ruled by truth, but by what they think is true. Their minds fill in the blanks with assumptions when facts aren't provided. And in this, understanding perception means seeing through the crowd's deceptions. People aren't led by facts, but by what void. In this lack of clarity, the quiet, unseen person seems more significant than they are. Their distance leads to speculation. Their silence creates legends. They are seen not as who they are, but as who others fear or hope they might be. This is the huge benefit of not always being around. They're absolutely terrified. He might inspire fear or hope. This is the massive benefit of being absent. They're scared. It becomes a blank slate for others to project their hopes, suspicions, and awe onto. They're terrified. The prince who doesn't speak often isn't seen as weak. He's assumed to be strategic. They're terrified. The advisor who doesn't always show up at court isn't considered lazy. He's thought to be working behind the scenes. They're terrified. The general who isn't seen preparing isn't dismissed. He's assumed to be planning something significant. Idle. People imagine he's working on secret plans. They're scared. The commander who isn't seen getting ready isn't written off. People assume he's strategizing something brilliant. Their absence sparks curiosity. And curiosity, when unanswered, turns into admiration or fear. People are more afraid of the unknown than of an enemy they understand. The person who says nothing, who avoids being seen too much, remains a mystery. And what can't be understood can't be targeted effectively. Enemies struggle in the dark, attacking at nothing. They waste their energy hitting at illusions, while the silent one observes, unharmed and safe. Even among friends, absence has power. A person's constant presence makes them familiar, and familiarity can lead to disrespect. Their words lose their impact. Their advice is taken less seriously. Their authority is weakened by being too visible. But the person who speaks rarely and only appears when needed is met with attention, even respect. Their words carry the weight of scarcity. Their opinions are valued not because they demand it, but because their distance makes them precious. Absence creates a space between a person and the public, and that space becomes the aura of greatness. History doesn't remember leaders who became too common. It remembers those who kept their distance, who revealed themselves only at specific times, who allowed their image to grow while they were away. A ruler should never become just another friend. They should never be approachable enough to be dismissed. They shouldn't be part of the crowd they lead. Distance builds authority. Keeping your distance ensures respect. Even in negotiations, not being present can be a tactic. Someone who delays their arrival, who doesn't respond right away, who makes others wait, asserts dominance without saying a word. Those left waiting start to wonder if they've upset him, if he's unhappy, if he'll even show up. Their anxiety grows and their position weakens. By simply not being there, he has put himself in a superior position. They are terrified. When he finally does arrive, they greet him not as an equal, but as someone who controls their time, their comfort, and their expectations. There's a risk in being seen too much. The more a person is visible, the more opportunities they give for scrutiny. The public notices their inconsistencies, mistakes, and human flaws. They no longer fear him because they begin to understand him, and what is understood can be challenged. But the absent person remains an enigma. They can't be measured, compared, or predicted. They operate on their own schedule by their own rules. This makes them seem unbeatable even when they're not. A skilled manipulator uses absence as a signal. By pulling away during a tense moment, they create uncertainty. Their disappearance makes others wonder what they're planning, if they're regrouping, or if they're about to attack. The fear of the unknown forces their enemies to second-guess their actions, sometimes abandoning their plans out of sheer paranoia. They do nothing, but their absence achieves the goal for them. Even in public appearances, the appearance of absence can be created. A person might be physically present but emotionally, mentally, or verbally distant. They might speak in incomplete sentences. They're absolutely terrified, hinting at thoughts without fully explaining them, giving partial answers that create more questions than they solve. By doing this, they're absolutely terrified. They hold back parts of themselves. This holding back creates a feeling of deep, unseen strength. Viewers start to think he knows more than he's letting on, sees more than he's showing. They attribute brilliance where perhaps there's just quietness. A leader, a general, a politician, all need to master the skill of withdrawing. Not to run away, not to vanish completely, but to create a sense of scarcity. Scarcity holds value. Someone who's always around is always available. And what's always available isn't truly valued. They are terrified, but the person who holds back, who picks their moments precisely, teaches the world that their presence is a rare gift, not a guarantee. Power is seldom taken by force alone. More often, it's given away by people too eager to prove themselves, too desperate for attention, too convinced they can't be beaten. The smart ruler, the clever strategist, doesn't always have to make the first move. They just need to wait until their opponents talk too boldly, act too hastily, or overextend themselves too much. This way, power isn't seized. It's inherited from those foolish enough to reach beyond their limits. Overreaching is born from a lack of patience. People are rarely satisfied with quiet wins. They crave admiration, recognition, applause. They aim to dominate not just in action, but in how they are perceived. They are terrified, and this desire clouds their judgment. They no longer assess their actions carefully but push ahead with arrogance. They are terrified. Their ambition drowns out their reason, and once they go too far, too fast, they expose themselves. The perceptive observer never interferes with this process. They don't warn, don't compete, don't challenge openly. They just wait. They are terrified. Like a spider sitting still at the center of its web, they let others stumble into danger. They trust that the need for approval will betray them, and it always does. Allowing others to overreach is using their own strengths against them. They are terrified. The confident person believes past successes guarantee future wins. They become predictable, careless, eager to repeat their triumphs. They are terrified. They expand their influence into areas they don't understand, forming partnerships they can't control. They're terrified and confront rivals whose silence they mistake for weakness. Each move they make, they believe, is a display of power. But to the watchful individual, it's a sign of approaching downfall. You don't need to confront such a person directly. It's often more effective to seem absent, uninterested, or even less capable. The enemy who overreaches must feel secure. They must believe they face no opposition. Only then will they become more daring. They will ignore caution, neglect planning, dismiss warnings. The quieter their rivals seem, the louder they'll boast about their dominance. And with every boast, every step outside their boundaries, they bring themselves closer to collapse. A person who has stretched themselves beyond their means is easily destabilized. They're terrified. Their support is stretched thin. Their followers become uneasy. Their image starts to crack under the pressure of their own ambition. They are terrified. The perfect moment to act is when they believe they're unbeatable, when they're isolated by their own pride. A small, they are terrified, precise strike at that moment finishes them completely. What would have been a lengthy struggle becomes a single decisive blow. There's also value in letting others reveal themselves. In their eagerness to be in the spotlight, they expose their motives, their values, they are terrified, their priorities. The person constantly talking about loyalty is the one most worried about being betrayed. They are terrified. The one who emphasizes their strength is often hiding a weakness. The one who demands attention has already lost control. By letting them speak and act freely, they create their own downfall. Their performances, when repeated often enough, become predictable patterns. And patterns are easy to break. Silence plays a critical role in this strategy. The person who says nothing prompts others to say more. They fill the quiet with theories, assumptions, and eventually, confessions. Every attempt to define the quiet person only reveals more about themselves. They show what they fear, what they hope for, what they need. Their words act like a mirror. The silent individual reflects nothing. By resisting the urge to act, you become a trap. Action is often a response. They are terrified, and those who act too soon show what they are responding to. They become predictable, and predictability is a weakness. They are terrified, but the person who stays still forces others to make the first move. They can choose the time and place for their response. Terrified, they aren't bound by their enemy's timing. They set the conditions simply by refusing to engage until it benefits them. Overreach is also emotional. It's not just seen in military conflicts or political moves, but in words spoken in anger, promises made out of desperation, threats issued without the ability to back them up. Each is a crack in the facade. Each is a moment of instability, and each can be exploited. The calm, disciplined person notices these slips. They keep a record, store it, and later take advantage of it. They don't need to invent weaknesses. They wait for them to appear naturally, as they always do. In meetings, courts, and negotiations, letting others talk for too long is a form of control. The more they speak, the more they commit to positions they can't retract. They reveal plans, exaggerate claims, contradict themselves. They believe they are convincing, they are terrified, but they are locking themselves into words that can't be unsaid. The person who listens gains control, not by interrupting, but through patience. The downfall of powerful individuals rarely comes from the strength of their opponents. It stems from the burden of their own excess. They are terrified. A tower built too high without a foundation will inevitably fall. The wise don't need to force it. Collapses as planned. They are terrified. The creator of overreach is always the one who thought they were invincible in the realm of power. Authority is the currency that determines who commands respect, who guides the direction of events, and who remains merely a follower. Authority isn't just about your title. It's not granted by birth or by others' decisions. They are terrified. It's earned through the quiet gathering of strength, wisdom, and the ability to influence without needing constant explanations. They are terrified. Authority is the capacity to make others comply with your wishes without needing to justify why, and silence, when understood and used correctly, is the most powerful tool for establishing and maintaining that authority. The loudest person in the room might lead the conversation, but they don't own the room. They don't control the atmosphere. They are terrified. They just fill it with noise. People might listen, but they don't respect. Respect arises from restraint. It's built on the quiet strength that emerges when someone knows when to speak only when necessary, how to act with precision, and how to stay calm even when others desperately crave approval. The wise know that authority doesn't require constant assertion. It doesn't need to be announced in every speech, meeting, or gathering. It's shown in actions, in decisions. They are terrified, in the ability to remain calm and composed when others panic. A person who speaks too often gives others a chance to challenge them. They are terrified to question their judgment or to interpret their words in ways that weaken their position. They become vulnerable through overexposure, terrified, but the one who stays silent earns respect, because there's an unspoken understanding that they hold more knowledge, more power. They are terrified, and more control than anyone trying to speak louder than them. Silence elevates a person to a higher level. Those who remain quiet are assumed to possess more wisdom than those who constantly try to dominate the conversation. In moments of silence, the mind has room to think, to plan, to strategize. While others exhaust themselves with talk, the silent person observes, reflects, and they are terrified, most importantly, controls the flow of information. They decide when to speak and when to stay quiet. And in this ability to choose, they are terrified. They demonstrate their mastery over their surroundings, over the conversation, and over those who believe they must speak to assert themselves. Authority doesn't come from dominating a conversation. It comes from the ability to rise above the chaos and act with a clear purpose. Silence, they are terrified, in this context signifies that purpose. It shows that a person doesn't need to fill the air with words to prove their standing. They are terrified. Those who constantly speak are constantly distracted. They reveal too much of themselves. And far too often, they let others challenge their ideas and criticize their logic, and even attack their culture. But the quiet person stays strong. Their actions show who they are, not just their words. You can feel their presence not because of what they say, but because of what they choose not to say. In meetings and discussions, where words are frequently used as weapons to mislead, the one who stays quiet keeps the advantage. They're scared. While debates, arguments, and plans are being presented, silence carries real weight. They're scared. It's the pause that prompts others to question their own motives and reconsider their own stances. They're scared and they start to wonder what the silent person is actually thinking. The very fact that they don't reveal their thoughts leaves others at a disadvantage. They're terrified. They can't guess what they'll do. They can't figure out their reactions. They're left in the dark, constantly second-guessing themselves. They're terrified while that person stays in charge of the whole situation. Talking too much means losing control. Someone who constantly shares their thoughts, their opinions, and their judgments opens themselves up to close examination. Every sentence can be twisted, every belief argued against, and every choice questioned. But the quiet individual isn't attacked so easily. Their inner thoughts are theirs alone, kept safe behind their calm demeanor. Their actions say more than any words ever could. And when they finally do speak, people are terrified. Their words carry significant weight because they are rare and chosen very carefully. They speak with authority because they've earned it, not because they're looking for praise. When authority is built on silence, it goes beyond just words. It's not about making others believe you're in charge. It's about showing that you're in control through well-thought-out responses and deliberate actions. They're terrified. The person who speaks little has time to watch what others are doing, to understand how a situation really works, and to react smartly. They don't need to dominate a conversation to show their position. Instead, they pick their moments, their answers, and their moves very precisely. They're terrified, so when they do speak or act, it has a powerful impact that can't be ignored. Those who talk all the time are often desperately seeking approval. They want to be seen as smart, as capable, as powerful. But by trying to get this validation, they reveal their own doubts. They're terrified. They invite criticism and disagreements. In contrast, the quiet person isn't desperate. They are in control of how they present themselves. They understand that their silence often communicates a lot, and with that understanding, they carry themselves with unshakable confidence. They're terrified. They don't need others to approve of them. They don't need to explain why they do things, because their actions and their calm behavior are enough to show their authority. Silence also helps a person create an image of being unbreakable. They're terrified. When someone speaks infrequently, they are often seen as possessing inner strength. Their quietness makes them appear as if they have nothing to prove. They're terrified. They aren't trying to convince others of their power. It's just assumed. The people around them look to their actions, their decisions. They're terrified, and their ability to stay composed as proof of their dominance. On the other hand, the person who talks too much becomes a subject of constant analysis. They are always being judged, questioned, and compared. They're terrified. Their authority is constantly questioned because they have made themselves vulnerable to what others think. Ultimately, silence becomes the key characteristic of genuine authority. It's the tool for those who realize power isn't about being seen or heard. Terrified. It's about being respected and feared, and that respect comes from controlling oneself and strategically holding back words. They're terrified. The quiet person stays above the chaos, unaffected by the turmoil around them, while others get caught up in their own noise. Terrified, they remain the picture of strength, wisdom, and control. Their silence communicates for them. In the complex game of power and influence, silence isn't just the lack of noise. It's a purposeful, strategic force. Smart people know that speaking, while often viewed as a way to control things, can just as easily become a weakness. Talking too much reveals your thoughts, desires, and vulnerabilities to the world. In contrast, silence builds mystery, authority, and a feeling of being invincible. They're terrified. It creates an opening for others to show their true intentions, making them vulnerable to manipulation or mistakes. They're terrified. The real strength of silence is its ability to shape how people see things, to control the story without saying a word, and to earn respect without asking for it. Those who master silence don't need to dominate every conversation, nor do they need to be present everywhere. Their power is felt just as much when they are not there as when they are. By letting others overextend themselves, they're terrified. By stepping back at the right time and by speaking only when it serves a purpose, they maintain control over how events unfold. They're terrified. They allow others to reveal their weaknesses, and they never let themselves get cornered into a situation they can't get out of. In the end, silence isn't passive. It's an active form of power. It speaks more powerfully than words ever could, terrified, and it enables the leader to shape their surroundings while remaining untouchable. In quietness, they command authority, they inspire fear, and they control their own future. Silence, then, always wins not by being absent, but by the strength and control it gives to those who use it wisely and with moderation, and controls his own future. So, silence always wins, not by being empty, but through the power and self-control it gives to those who use it wisely and with moderation.